Here's the panther, looking for his opponent. There's the atlas beyond the woods, and there's the assassin. You know, he just doesn't care. He's going to try to shoot at him because he has line of sight to both of them. I know you wouldn't think so through the woods, but he's a panther, and he can get anything. So let's see how we do this. Alright, combat in Alpha Strike. We'll start with obviously the introductory rules, because that's all I've got right now, but the full ones come on out in a couple days, and we'll cover a little bit of that. So let's talk about combat. So in the basic rules, in the introductory Alpha Strike rules, combat takes up 6 pages. In the standard Alpha Strike, it takes up 11. So it covers a little bit more detail about the extra weapons, probably some more line of sight issues, more complications. But let's talk about, I think, because for the most part, most of the steps will be about the same. So if you look at the steps for combat, you have to determine if you have line of sight, determine if it's in your firing arc, if you have the range, determine your to hit number. You roll your 2d6 to hit, and that's what the fun is. You apply the damage, and then you roll critical hits. So these are the steps to combat to date. On this vid, I just want to talk about line of sight, and maybe if it's not too long, I'll talk about firing arc. Line of sight in the basic is pretty basic. If you look over here, let's zoom out a little bit and try to get some focus here. Yeah, that's not going to work, so let's just go down here. So that, basically it says to get down to the level of the mech that you want to shoot with and see what they can see. And he can pretty much see that assassin, right? He's wide open. He can see that atlas over there too, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So it's basic. If they can see it, they can see each other, and they've got line of sight. So now here's where it gets a little weird. If less than 1/3 of the model has any sort of covering, it has no cover. So let's take a look at that assassin. Now my hills are pretty small. Let's say this is a hill or a wall. You have solid objects like hills, buildings, mountains, whatever, that completely block line of sight. I would think dropships do too. Solid objects. Now you can see here that it's not really covering 1/3 of that assassin. So with that, he does not have any cover whatsoever. But if you go back over here, if it's less than 1/3, greater than 1/3, but yet less than 2/3, he has partial cover. So these are a little thicker hills here, and we'll just say that it's covered. So now he's got about 1/3, so about his knees. So he would have partial cover, and we'll talk about what that is when we talk about determining the to-hit number. And if I went up to here and added this, looking down the thing, I would say he still has less than 2/3 covered. Right? So you can still see him, he would still get partial cover. Now you add that, and while you can see it, he's got full cover, so it blocks line of sight, so you technically couldn't see him. So that's what that's about. And so less than 1/3 of the robot is covered, he has no cover. If greater than 1/3 and less than 2/3, he has partial cover. And if it's equal to or greater than 2/3 of the robot is covered, he has no line of sight and it is blocked. And that's with solid objects, buildings and hills in the standard or in the basic Alpha Strike rules. Now let's talk about woods. It's a little bit more complicated. Not really, but it's called and I'm suddenly forgetting the name. But it's partial terrain. It doesn't block line of sight. So partial terrain doesn't block it. So let's take, for example, let's say he's here. Let's say he's shooting that line of sight right down these trees here. Okay? So what you have to do is, and this atlas is on the other side of the woods, you have to do is see how far through the woods is he having to look. So you look here and you can't really see this ruler here, but it says 3 inches. So if he's looking through here and it's only through 3 inches of woods, he has no cover of whatsoever. No partial, no full, nothing. Now, if you were to turn this let's say he was shooting through here, say maybe even like over here to here, and what you do is you draw from the, actually, you know what, I don't know this for a fact, I need to find this out, but I would draw from probably like the middle of the front of the base, actually from the middle of the base to the object and see. Well, if you laid this down and measured it, which I've already done, it's 7 inches. So it's blocked. So let me, could be confusing. If it's 6 inches or more of woods, it blocks line of sight. Okay? So it's either no cover or blocks line of sight. Now, if the atlas is within woods, he doesn't get any partial cover. Now, if he was 6 inch plus 6 inches deep in the woods, then you wouldn't be able to see him. Now, what's kind of interesting, and I was going to do this via Hangout, but some circumstances make it so I can't do this through Hangout. If you look at this is all from the first preview, which is available on the website. There's a table there that gives you the chart, and it says you get it if you're in woods. It says you don't get the partial cover modifier, but you do get a woods cover modifier, which is the same as the partial cover modifier. I'm not really sure why they did it that way, but that's the way they did it. So if you're in woods, you get a woods modifier of +2. So that's line of sight to there. Now let's talk about, so basically that's it. Solid objects, hills and buildings, block it if you're, those percentages I give you. Woods, if you're 6 inches or more, it's blocked. If you're within 6 inches, you can see it. If you're in the woods, there is a woods modifier, but it's not a partial cover modifier, even though it's the same. Now, let's look at something. Let's look at water. I don't really have a good way of illustrating this besides my little drawing here. All the ground is level 0. Okay? If you're standing in level 1 of water, which is about an inch, so you could draw this out. You could just, like, if you had a water object, you could just say level 1 water, and so you'd know everyone in level 1 water would have, essentially partial cover. Even if the person was way up here, he'd still have partial cover. As soon as you go to level 2, it's essentially as though it's submerged. So you could have some really cool tables where you build up. You could even use like 2-inch foam, and that could be your ground, and then you dig out the water and paint it blue, and call that your water. That could be pretty cool. But he's completely submerged and you can't shoot at him. I don't know if there's special rules that modify that, but that's how that works. So that's line of sight. Now let's talk about firing arc real quick. I think we have time. We're at 8 minutes here. So I could probably draw this out. So let me see if I can set this up so you can look at the atlas a moment. Through the woods. Yeah, see? You could totally see him. He has no cover whatsoever. So I should probably do that here. Okay, this is the front of my panther, or I'm sorry, that's the front of the panther. Man, I need to get some more light on this subject here. It's so funny how dark it is, yet I've really got a lot of light here. Anyway, so the panther is facing that direction. Anything behind this line is the rear arc for firing purposes. So he could fire on anything in front of that line. Okay. So basically it's wherever he's pointed is where he can see, and anything behind that he can't shoot at, anything he can fire at, he can shoot at. There could be special rules to that. And I believe anything coming in, firing here, so coming within these boundaries of this hex, would be considered a rear shot. Otherwise it's all coming in from the front. I'll have to check that to verify that, but we'll get into that when I get into combat. But for firing purposes, for this guy to fire, he has to fire at anything in front of that line. All right. Well, that's line of sight for combat, and we'll come back shortly with another video talking about determining the range, your to hit number, rolling to hit, applying damage, and critical hits. See ya.